welcome to Publishing Essentials for LitMags, a series of webinars created to deliver a foundation in business skills for arts, literary, indie, and other small magazines. My name is Joyce Byrne, and it's my pleasure to produce Publishing Essentials on behalf of the Alberta Magazine Publishers Association. In today's lesson on successful special projects, we are pleased to welcome Laurie D. Graham. Laurie grew up in Treaty 6 territory, east of Edmonton, and has lived in Peterborough, Ontario, in the territory of Bemidji, Saugig, Anishinaabeg since 2018, where she is a poet, an editor, and the publisher of Brick, a literary journal. With 2 decades of experience working with literary journals in Canada, Laurie has edited the work of writers the world over, including Anne Carson, Michael Ondaatje, Louise Erdrich, Sheila Heti, Don DeLillo, Ocean Vuong, and many others. She is on the steering committee of the Literary Magazines Canada Collective, and she is the chair of the Arts, Literary, and Cultural Committee of Magazines Canada. Her own creative work has been published in numerous literary magazines, and her newest book of poetry is Calling It Back to Me, and is published by McClelland and Stewart. Over to you, Laurie.
Thank you, Joyce. So, Brick is an independent literary journal. We're a journal of literary nonfiction. We're based in Toronto. We've been publishing for some 49 years now. We have a wide reach in terms of where the magazine goes and who reads it and who contributes to it. But we are essentially a pretty small and pretty constrained operation for the scope of the magazine that we make. So we are somewhat limited in terms of the things we can do from year to year to keep the magazine functional and out there in the world. We receive operating funding from the Canada Council for the Arts and the Ontario Arts Council, but we do also apply for project grants to do supplementary work that needs to be done for the magazine. Project grants are a source of some heartache and stress for some publishers, just because they take an amount of work, and they often seem like they're demanding that you do things that are so far outside of the fundamental operations of editing and producing and publishing a magazine. But we have found a way at Brick to have those project grants to make them work effectively for us and to have them be as responsive as they can to the work we're doing. So we are always tracking, measuring, assessing, conversing, surveying, imagining what the magazine needs. So we will see that there is a need that we are unable on our own to fulfill, say really high response at events, or the breaking down of our website. These sorts of things we make note of, or we will survey our readers to find out how they read the magazine, how they read the website, what fuels donations for them, what prompts them to subscribe, all that sort of really valuable information. We will discuss amongst ourselves. We are full of ideas for what might be a really great thing for the magazine, or what might even be a really great thing to try, because we of course don't know everything about what might work for the magazine. So we're keeping very close tabs, and I, as the publisher of Brick, take that as part of my job, is just to kind of keep our wishes, our wish list maintained, and to have that in mind as we go through our day-to-day work. And then at the same time, regularly keeping track of what project grants are out there and available, what they fund, what the requirements are, etc., to keep an up-to-date list of what we might be able to apply for, and then trying to put those two things together in a way that's quite meaningful. So we like to use project grants to fund things that we know will work. One example of that is events, which I had mentioned before. We had once the pandemic lockdowns started to lift and there were more public events out in person in the world, book fairs, literary festivals, and the like, we were noticing a really positive response at those events. Lots of people there, really, really excited, really ready to read the issues that Brick was putting out. And so we were getting a good response at those fairs. So we wanted to try to do more. And this is where a project grant meshes with the thing that we want to test. And so the grant from there more or less writes itself, where we see this organic thing that we are unable to fund by ourselves. And so we would like to apply for this project grant to test the following literary events, making them economically viable to have it be a financially responsible sort of thing is always a helpful thing for a project grant. To measure the results and to think about basically how we might be able to then incorporate some aspects of that project into our day-to-day operations. So we found a few different festivals that we had not ever been to before, that where the entry fee was really reasonable for us and the return was really, really positive. We have good responses at these few festivals that we know go to every year. We know that they're going to be a source of new subscriptions and new sales. And so that's to me kind of the ideal project for a granted the ideal granted project for us is one where we we see the thing that is happening, we get the funding to help respond to the thing, and then we are able to then uh, alter our operations or augment our operations with this stuff, with these activities that we know will work for us. So that's how we treat project grants. We are also thinking about existing things that we do around, say, advertising, web design, etc., and funding, applying for project funding to help bolster existing operations. So it's not exactly within the realm of what we do day to day, but it's just kind of, if we had the money, this is what we would do. So that's another way that we approach the project grants that we write. And we are also thinking long term, and we're thinking in steps in a way too, because often a project has stages to it that may exceed the bounds of a project grant or may exceed our own capacities to manage a big composite project, a multi-part project. So uh, it usually helps our cause to say, we have done this work to date. We have with project funding, we have completed this, and this is the next step in that project. So to think over a span of many years is kind of a helpful thing for us too. That in a nutshell is how we approach the funding of operations outside of publishing. And if you want to hear more, I've got some more to tell you in the following modules about some specifics around that. Thank you for listening. I would like to talk a bit about events and taking your magazine out into the world, as well as bookstore distribution, consignment, that sort of thing. The way that Brick appears to readers who are not familiar with the magazine is largely through being in bookstores and on newsstands and being at book fairs and literary festivals and other events. So we've put a lot of focus into those two methods of essentially marketing. Having your magazine in a bookstore is a marketing tool. Um, Standing at a book fair, introducing your magazine and showing it, handing it to a eager reader is a really important marketing tool as well. And it's one that is really important to Brick. We have found that the one-to-one um, communication between the people who make Brick and the people who potentially read it is a really vital relationship. It's a really important conversation for us to have. So we will take our magazine out to a select number of festivals and fairs every year. As I mentioned in a previous model, we have done some testing to find out which ones work for us. We have found a few fairs where the entry fee is completely manageable, and we are confident that we would make that fee back when we go to those fairs. So we will, um, I should pause here with a little caveat that it's a lot of work to go to events. The work of staffing the booth, the work of packing up and hauling magazines, the work of just getting yourselves there and back, the work of being a social being when you're usually more inclined to the one to like the more solitary work of editing or writing, etc. So it is an amount of effort and kind of different from what you're doing otherwise, but it's really valuable, and you're never going to find a more like-minded individual than a person who comes to, say, Word on the Street in Toronto, or to a literary festival, a local literary festival. These are your people. So this is kind of how we think of our presence in these places. And I also channel my dad when I go to book fairs and public events like this, where it's kind of like it feels a little like sales, and in fact it is. My dad he's going to be 80 years old this year, and he's still working, and he's been in sales and marketing for a really long time. And I learned from him how to talk to strangers, essentially. As being more like my mother, a more introverted sort, whose first impulse is to not really engage with people, I channel my dad, and I just basically ask questions of people. That's the way I stand at the book table. So at the table, we've got bricks of all stripes arrayed around the table. We set it up really wonderfully, make it so that there's lots to look at. We are usually standing and like present. That these are kind of silly tips, but they have made a difference for us to kind of sit and be mostly covered by the bricks doesn't tend to work in terms of sales. So we just kind of try to be as present as we can. And we ask people if they've heard of Brick before. We start with something quite open-ended and just try to engage people in conversation. Quite a few people are happy to be able to learn more about the magazine. They want to hear, they're there to hear your spiel. They want to hear about what your magazine is and what it publishes, what makes it different from any other magazine. They're thinking in their heads often, who would like this magazine? If not them, then who? So understanding and getting to know people's reactions is actually a really important thing at events like this. So that open-ended question gives you a good sense of what they're here for, what they like to read, and if you could ask them too, what kind of stuff do you read? Like just being in a fellow literary lover in conversation together with another person. That's kind of at the foundation of book fair presence for us. And then we're just making sure that we tell them, what this magazine is, what it does, and how to get it, where to find it. So that could include getting them to subscribe right there at the table. That's like a really big driver for our presence at those fairs. We could be acquainting them with work that has been published by the favorite writer that they just mentioned that they loved reading and we happen to publish. So it's just kind of being there to draw those kinds of connections, telling them where brick might be available if we're in bookstores or if it's not in the library, just tell them to go ask for brick in the library, etc. These sorts of little details just about it's as much about educating as it is about promoting. So to just be able to talk to people about what magazines do. What is a literary magazine? I get this question quite a lot at the book fair table. So you are in a way an ambassador for the form, in addition to being a representative of the magazine you help make. So there's a lot going on at your average literary event. So that is, in a nutshell, book festivals and fairs. And to to have them turn a profit is somewhat imperative for us. So as I had mentioned in a previous module, we're making sure that we're going to a place where we're going to meet what we think will be the ideal future reader of the magazine. You have to kind of match your magazine to the place you're going to, and it's through testing and through those kinds of in-person conversations that you get to know really well if a fair is a good fit. And they are consecutive beasts as well. The more you go, the more response you get, is what I've found. To go once and never go again, you might not see the response that you were hoping for. But if someone recognizes you, if someone goes to a festival year after year and gets to know the presence of or the appearance of your magazine, that's a really, really useful thing as well. That in a nutshell is book festivals and fairs. I was going to talk also about bookstores and about consignment. Brick is distributed. We have distributors. So distribution is code for being in bookstores. Circulation is code for subscriptions, more or less. So when we talk about distribution, we're talking about the middle people, the entities that sit between us, the magazine, and the bookstores. So we are distributed in Canada by an entity called Magazines Canada, which you may have heard of. There's Distacor as well in Canada. They're another one of the biggies. In the US, we have two distributors. Uh, ANC, also called Accelerate 360, they have about 3 or 4 different names that I know of. It's quite confusing, and their names have changed a number of times over the years. They do kind of national US distribution, though sparse. I wouldn't assume that that means that we're everywhere. We're in a select number of largely independent bookstores in certain locales in the US, and Small Changes, which is a more regional distributor, and they are based in the West. They distribute to mainly bookstores on the West Coast as well as a few other states in the general West half of the US. And then we also have international distribution through Central Books, and there are a whole host of international distributors. And we are in, I think these days, with Central Books, we're in, I think almost a dozen countries in bookstores in about a dozen countries around the world. We in the past also had Australian distribution. We were in Australia and I think New Zealand as well. Um, I won't go through the list of distributors here. You can Google that one. But the basic premise for that is that the distributor gives us a draw, tells us the number of issues that we shall send to their warehouse, and then they distribute the magazines to those stores from there. A period of months goes by, usually about 9 to 12, and then we hear how sales went for that particular issue. We get a report, we get a check, or we get funds transferred to us. The split, generally speaking, the amount that we get versus the amount that the distributor hangs on to is around 60-40, more or less, give or take. I don't know if that's changing now. There's been in recent years anyways, there's been a bit of fiddling with that number, turning up the bookstores take a little bit, turning up the distributors take a little bit. But generally speaking, we will see between 50 and 60% back uh, from sales of our magazine. Um, that uh, that model can be replicated in a really small way. It just takes a little bit more admin uh, work, a bit more minding. We do consignment as well with certain stores who don't want to go through a distributor, who don't carry enough to warrant a distributor, or who are friendly to small independent magazines who want to get their magazines out there. So we will informally contact a bookstore. We have done some dedicated pushes where we just kind of compile a list of stores that we are not in, that Brick is not in, and just start calling them up and say, do you want to be in our stores? We point them to our distributor and say that we're open to consignment arrangements as well. So it's much the same deal. If a store is interested in consignment, we ask them how many copies they want. We negotiate what the split will be, and it's usually about the same, usually about 60-40. And we organize the mailing of issues to the store. Now, we've made it somewhat easy for ourselves in that we enter a consignment store into our subscriber database as a subscriber. So we send usually on average about 3 copies to a bookstore at least to start. It's a good test number, and we just mail those 3 copies off. Once the issue publishes, they receive the copies, they will put them on the newsstands, and then all you have to really do is make a reminder for yourself to check in just before the next issue comes out to say, hey, how are sales? Do you want to send us some money for them? Usually you send an invoice for those sales, that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of maintenance and checking in that needs to happen, but it works pretty well for those smaller stores to do that consignment. And often those consignment stores have pretty good sales. They have that more personal relationship seems to make a difference. The store will say yes to consigning your magazine when they know that it's going to be a good fit, whereas the relationship between a bookstore and a distributor might not be quite so bang on, quite so close. And this is a way to kind of to strengthen community in a way, to make sure that your own magazine is in the places in your community where the readers are, is really, really important. That's kind of the engine that makes this whole thing go. So consignment is something that is worth considering if you haven't yet, to get your magazine into the places where you'll find new readers. So that's that's taking your mag out into the world in a nutshell. Thank you very much for listening.